Alright guys, welcome back to another episode of Guns and Guitars, and I'm very excited today because we are going to be looking at my very first kit from Pitbull Guitars. Now, if you're like me, you looked at this JZ-6 kit and you saw an offset body with 3 single coil pickups with a 30-inch scale neck, and you probably immediately thought this is a clone of the Fender Bass 6. But I am actually here to tell you that that is not the case. The longer that I've had this, the more I've realized that there are more dissimilarities than there are similarities. So this kit really is its own beast. And I'm gonna go through that as I assemble it, and then we'll see how it sounds like at the end. I'm Dan, this is Guns and Guitars. Let's get started. So firstly, if this were truly a clone of a Fender Bass 6, we would see the trademarked design headstock, and of course here we have a blank paddle, which I really appreciate. I feel like the whole point in building a do-it-yourself guitar kit is that you get to make something that's truly custom to your taste, and I like being able to shape my own headstocks to be different from anything else on the market. Now the next thing you'll notice is that this body shape is actually a little bit different than your typical Fender offset body shape. You can see here this upper horn is just a little bit skinnier, and this lower bout extends a little bit further. And then last thing, you'll see this lower horn right here is actually a bit thicker, okay? On the Fender styles, this has a little bit more meat right here, a little bit less meat right here, and then there's usually a tiny little notch right here to make this less rounded. So the body shape really has been changed enough to be its own thing. I don't believe that Fender actually trademarks their body shapes or their pick guards like some other brands do, so that probably wouldn't be a trademark concern. But I do appreciate, I really think we need more kits out there that are different shapes than the standard manufacturers. Speaking of pickguard shapes, this is clearly not even close to a Fender Bass 6. Fender Bass 6, we could talk about the pickups and control layout once we get to that portion of the build, but you can see that this pickguard already extends way the heck up here. That obviously looks really out of place. So let's go ahead and finish building this thing, and as I'm putting it together, I'll point out other dissimilarities that I find along the way. So it's important, even if you are just assembling a kit as is, that you plan out your build so that you don't have any surprises. And I've already found one surprise, and that's with this Jaguar Jazzmaster style tremolo and the 30-inch scale neck. The included kit strings are actually not even long enough to reach the tuners. You can see that they end right about at the second tuner, which means I could string up the E and A strings and nothing else. And so I suspected that might be the case. I had really hoped that they were thoughtful enough to include long scale guitar strings with this. And I did search through the box to see if there was an extra set of strings somewhere that I'm missing, and there was not. So this is a big issue, and probably my biggest request to Adam over there at Pitbull Guitars is to ship this kit with some strings you can actually use. But I'm gonna go ahead and real quick Amazon Prime myself a set of long scale baritone strings so that we can actually string this thing up and test it. All right, so scratching the Amazon Prime thing because I really want to get this thing strung up and playing today. Here's what I did. I found that this set of D'Addario NYXL 11s actually ran the full length, just barely. I'll be able to get it strung up on that last tuner peg. And so what I did is I'm making my own set sort of baritone Bass 6 sort of strings where I'm using 2 bass strings for my E and A. These are the top 2 strings. These would be your D and G string on a 4-string bass. And then I'm going to string up what would be my E, A, D, and G strings. I'm going to string up as my D, G, B, and E strings. So if that's not confusing at all for you, basically just using 2 bass strings and then the heavier side of a D'Addario NYXL set of 11s. So hopefully that'll get us into the range that we're trying to play and demo here. While my soldering gun heats up, let's go ahead and talk about some more differences with this kit versus a Fender Bass 6, because up until this point, all the differences have been purely cosmetic. There's one more cosmetic thing to look at, and that's this jack plate right here. As you can see, that's a jazz bass style jack plate with 3 holes for your pots and 1 hole for your output. So on a Fender Bass 6, it would be more like a Jaguar plate that only has 2 knobs and an output jack. It all comes pre-wired, and so between that and this being pre-wired, you only have 3 connections that you actually need to make in order for this to work. So this is definitely a beginner level soldering electronic setup, okay? But the real difference that I want to talk to you about is the fact that this is not wired like a Bass 6 whatsoever. So Bass 6 has a switch plate right here with 4 slide switches that would be your on-off switches for your 3 single coil pickups, and the last one is your strangle switch, which basically kind of cuts the low end out of it. This is actually just wired like a Stratocaster. So we have 3 single coil pickups, we've got a 5-way import selector switch, and then we've got volume, tone, tone. So that's the first reason why I think this is actually not going to sound at all like a Bass 6, because with a Bass 6, you can get any pickup combination you want, including these 2 together and all 3 together using your slide switches versus the 5-way selector switch. So really, this thing's going to end up sounding more like a baritone Stratocaster as opposed to a Fender Bass 6. But let's go ahead and wire it up, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about this pickup layout. Now this is something I noticed when I did my unboxing during my live stream last week, and I wanted to wait until it was mostly assembled to point it out to you guys. You can see that this pickup layout is entirely different than the pickup layout from a Fender Bass 6. On a Fender Bass 6, your bridge pickup would be further back here towards the bridge, the middle one would probably be about right here, and the neck one would be about right there. So these are kind of squished up to the front half of the guitar. This thing, I suspect, is going to sound nothing like a Bass 6, which is good because Adam told me this is not a Bass 6 and he doesn't want me telling people that it is a Bass 6. All right, I've got another message for Adam at Pitbull, if you're watching this. These plastic nuts that come on these kits are pretty much never cut to the proper height. And I think most people, when they buy a guitar kit, they expect to replace the nut anyway. I mean, Adam, you certainly expect them to because you sell the bone nut replacements as an optional upgrade. And so if you want to sell upgrades, I've noticed an increasing trend with these kits that they're putting more and more glue on this nut piece. And regardless of whether you're going to upgrade it or if you're going to leave it this cheap plastic nut, you're still going to need to get it out to do some work on it. So my recommendation is talk to your supplier about making sure these nuts are not so hard to get off. That sounded really dirty and I really didn't mean to. I think we got it. There we go. All right, look at that. Look at how much glue is on that thing. That is ridiculous. Here I'm just sanding down the base of the nut because the string action was way too high at the nut. Now that's not a huge deal breaker. In fact, pretty much every kit that I get needs that adjustment. I'm just trying to get this thing playable enough to do a good quality sound demo. It looks like our neck is perfectly aligned with the bridge. That is wonderful because the neck pocket had no play in it, so making an adjustment there would have required some routing. I think I might have installed my tremolo a little bit crooked. If so, that's on me. I definitely put my tremolo in the wrong spot. I tried to center it on the route, and that was a mistake. I should have centered it on the bridge. So I just glued in some toothpicks with some tight bond. Now I'm going to snip them and re-drill holes in the correct spot. So now that it's strung up, it's easier to see how off the route was for the tremolo, because I have this thing moved over as far this way as I can, and you can see how my strings kind of go in and then they kind of slope this way. And I had to end up tilting this a little bit so that this high E string would clear the tremolo bar, otherwise it was pressed up against the tremolo bar, which would have been a nightmare for extra noise when working the tremolo. But overall, I think it's playable like this. The tuning stability might not be so great with that extra break angle kind of curving around like that. So that's going to be something that I'm going to need to fix yet again in the final builds. I'll need to route out a little extra material and move that over just a little bit. All right, now that this thing is all strung up and I've had a chance to jam on it for a while, just want to mention a few more things to you. So, firstly, we do have some tuning stability issues, but that's to be expected. I mean, we've got a plastic nut, we've got a two-pneumatic bridge that's really nothing special, doesn't have any roller saddles or anything. But I think the biggest issue is the Jaguar-style tremolo route being off-center. So we've got a funky break angle as the strings go over that. I mentioned that earlier when I was putting it together. But also, because I had to move it as far over to the side of that route as possible, I can feel the tremolo rubbing the inside of that cavity ever so slightly, and it's gotten better the more that I've kind of broken it in. Probably just that material is wearing down, but that'll be fixed when I elongate that cavity a little bit to fit the tremolo in the right spot. So really what I'm trying to say is, as it currently stands, you can't slam on that tremolo. You really just have to be very gentle with it, otherwise your tuning kind of goes to heck. Another thing that I noticed is that, well, firstly, this thing sounds really good, and the neck, middle, and bridge pickups individually all sound awesome. The middle and bridge pickup together also sounds awesome. The issue is that the neck and middle pickups together do not sound awesome. And it's not a personal preference thing. It's the fact that they are actually out of phase with each other, and they're actually not reverse wound with each other. So not only are they not hum canceling, but they're also out of phase, which just makes for a really unusable tone. So that's why you're not hearing a sound demo of those two pickups together specifically. The neck and frets are awesome. The neck is actually a really thick profile, more like a bass thickness profile, which feels really comfortable to me as a bass player. The frets are fairly level. They're crowned and polished really good. I was able to get a pretty decent setup on this with really minimal fret buzz and no dead spots on the fretboard or anything. So that's really good. It's been a long time since I've had a kit where the frets were good and playable kind of out of the box. And then also, the fret ends are finished really well. There's not a single sharp fret on this thing. So I was really happy with the neck. Probably, honestly, the best part about this whole kit. Now, aside from all my criticisms, I don't want this to sound like a really negative video or that I'm just slamming this kit, because this guitar is really cool. It sounds really good, and it is really fun to play. And that's kind of the most important thing. I mean, that's the reason why I like to build guitars, is because it helps kind of reignite the flame to play and practice. And I've just really enjoyed jamming on this thing the last couple days and laying down these recording samples for you. It really is like nothing else. So I'm really looking forward to building this up into my version of a Bass 6. And let me know in the comments if you guys have any ideas for the finish or for just, you know, general upgrades or whatever. I know somebody mentioned in my live stream that I should try putting a piezo pneumatic bridge on there. I think that's a great idea. So we'll probably be doing that. And if you want to see what it would be like to try to turn one of these things into a Bass 6, make sure you're subscribed because that video is going to be coming up. I'm Dan, this is Guns and Guitars, and I will see you in that next video.